Hey guys, this is Gavin from Health and Performance, and here is Billy Frost helping us today. Welcome to part 3 of how to address arm bicep pain after squatting. In part 3 now, we're just going to run through what are the mobility requirements that you need, and also expanding on part 2, how can we make that better if you can't meet the positional requirements. So in part 1 we went through some things you can use to address the acute symptoms, the acute pain, just to get you through the training process that's occurring at the time. In part 2 we went through how to get set up properly under the bar and take more load of the squat in your back rather than into your arms and elbows. In part 3 now we're just going to run through what are the mobility requirements that you need, and also expanding on part 2, how can we make that better if you can't meet the positional requirements, okay? So Billy's going to get under the bar again. I'm just going to give you guys a reminder of what we went through in part 2 in terms of mobility. So you can see here we need thoracic extension, we need external rotation at the glenohumeral joint, coupled with depression of the scapula. So the scapular position is really going to heavily drive what's going on at the glenohumeral joint, which is ball and socket joint here. But we basically need external rotation. We can see this here. The hand, Billy's hand, is pretty much behind her shoulder. We also need sufficient amount of internal rotation so we can actually get the hand down and the thumb under the bar and grip tightly. And finally, we need sufficient shoulder extension through here. So we can see this this elbow sitting behind the shoulder, which is going to be a position of extension, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move Billy around now. Let's just kind of say then that she doesn't have adequate external rotation, extension or internal rotation. When she gets under the bar, she's going to have trouble. We're just going to unhook that thumb as well. Yep. She's going to have trouble really getting in. So we look and we go, okay, so we don't have as much external rotation going on here. We definitely don't have as much internal rotation happening because she's unable to grab the bar in this example, and we certainly don't have as much extension of the shoulder through here. So what people often do then, this is what drives part of the issue, is they will then force themselves into internal rotation to grab the bar, which is actually going to create a lot of rotation at the elbow. So if we can't get that movement from the shoulder, it's going to come from lower down. So we start getting more rotation at the elbow. Yep. So just keep the elbow under. So bring that thumb under the bar again without moving the elbow back. And yeah, you can see straight away that with her wrist there, her wrist is going to start coming back into a little bit more extension. We're going to get rotation happening through the elbow. Yeah. And then because we don't have as much load in the back, a lot of this load is driven down into the brachialis here. So that elbow is flexed, yeah? It's flexed in what would be ordinarily a neutral position, yeah? Which is really sort of where we start recruiting more brachialis and radiobrachialis. And those are the exact muscles that are under a strong isometric load in that position through here, yeah? Okay? So it's gonna get Billy from out under there. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to go to the floor, so you can join us over there, and we're just going to run through how to determine which portion of the requirement you don't have, and then how to address it. All right, guys, so when we start looking at how to assess mobility, range of motion, etc., we're going to run through that now. Before we do that, though, I'm just going to preface it with, we need to understand that there's a difference between active and passive range of motion. So with each of the components, we're going to take Billy through first of all, the passive range, which is where she's passive, so I'm going to be moving her arm. Then we're going to get her to take her own arm through that range, which is the active range. So the reason we need to differentiate between the two is because if we see that the passive range is insufficient, and then she goes into the active range, and that is just as insufficient, i.e. it gets to the same point, then that's where we might need to do some general, dare I say, stretching, some actual mobility work, to improve the range. If we take her into a passive range and then get her to take herself into that active range, and we see the active range is a lot less than the passive range, then that's going to be primarily more of a stability issue, okay? So, well, that'll make more sense as we go through this, but essentially what we want to do is make sure that she can move herself into the full range, which is not necessarily going to be like mobilizing things. It's going to be a case of making her shoulder more stable so that her nervous system, her brain thinks that this is now a safe range, because if the shoulder in this instance can't move into the end range we're looking for because there's a lack of stability, that's why it's not going. That's why there's a restriction. It's not because there's a true restriction of things are tight, etc., etc. Okay, so that'll make more sense as we go. So what we're going to run through external rotation. First, we're going to look at the passive active ranges, and then we're going to run through some things you can do if you don't quite meet these requirements yourself when you're doing these tests at home. Okay, so we're going to take Billy here, first of all, into external rotation. So I'm going to take her, so this is the passive component, so I'm going to take her in through here, and she's absolutely fine through there. Okay, so she's getting 90 degrees of external rotation, which is ideal. We come up now, so now Billy's going to take herself into external rotation. Yeah, we can see then that she also gets 90 degrees. Yep, so we're looking pretty much the same here. Now, let's just say that this is you at home lying on the floor, and I'm taking your arm into external rotation, and we're getting pretty damn close to 90 degrees. And then you take yourself, so you're into the active range, and you only get, say, 45. So let's just say something like this. So when you're doing this at home, you get to here and you can't get any further. What we need to do here, like I said, is not stretch anything, because we know that you can move into that range. It's just that what we need to do now is basically prime some of these external rotators so that you can move into that range with more stability. So stability in the end range, okay? So what we'll do now is we're going to show you just some very simple exercises you can do at home now. We're just going to give you 3 options. And I'm not going to say these are the very best 3, because I don't know if there is a best 3. We're just going to go 3 options. These are 3 amongst many, many other options you can utilize, okay? So let's get Billy standing up. Right guys, so the first option we're going to run through, and again, this is not an order of preference, it's just where we started. So Billy's going to go into an overhead kettlebell position through here. So whenever we look at these positions where we're trying to encourage stability, we need to ensure that whatever we do, we're trying to get that humerus buried deep in the glenoid through there, yeah? So we're actually creating stability through these through these anatomical components. Now, with that kettlebell, it's going to load the arm downwards, okay? Then all she's going to do is she's going to move into external rotation. And we can go maybe 6 times through there, so Billy's going to work through that. The added bonus of this, of course, is that it encourages upward rotation of the scapula, and we also get some serratus anterior activation through here as well, which is going to help to tip that scapula posteriorly. So you can work through 6 there and come down. So that's one option through there. Next up, I'll take that for you. Next up, we're going to get Billy on the floor, just on her left side. Second option we have for external rotation here is the side laying. So this works pretty well because we're directly resisting gravity. Quite often you see people doing this standing up with a dumbbell. There's no real resistance of gravity there, so we need to get onto your side. Yeah. So the way we're going to perform this then is we're going to try and bring the shoulder blade, think of moving that across to the opposite glute. That's going to facilitate using the lat here as a depressor of the scapula. So again, that ties into what we're trying to achieve with the squat, which is utilizing the lats and also using them as a depressor of the scapula. Yeah, this elbow is going to be sitting directly under the shoulder, and Billy from here is going to hold that position and then just go into external rotation. So she's actively getting these external rotators, so the infraspinatus teres minor, working to rotate that shoulder through here. There we go. And we might go through 10, 12 repetitions of this. Good. So we'll do another few. So guys, again, what we're doing here is we're trying to, I guess, activate is a word that's commonly used now. I think of it more as priming. We're trying to prime those external rotators so they provide more stability in the end range of external rotation. Okay, that's how we're going to get into that position. And down, that's fine. Great, Billy. Okay, I'll take that dumbbell for you, Billy, and we're just going to get her on her front now. What we're going to do is going to get her just to slide her shoulder blade down, okay, and then you see her palms are face down on the ground. What she's going to do, she's going to try and lift her whole arm and hand off the floor and lead with the thumb. So we're going to try and lead with the thumb up through there. That's it, and down. Okay, so you can do that both sides at the same time. There we are, good. And yeah, so she's really working these external rotators with the glenohumeral joint and actively working sort of mid and lower traps in through here, which is going to facilitate the scapular position in the squat, also the bench press as well. So you're going to run through maybe 10 to 12 repetitions of this. That's great, well done, Billy. Excellent, cool. So guys, there's 3 options there for you to use. So we're going to retest Billy now. So we're going to get her onto her back and working that right side. So of course in the initial test everything was fine. But if you find yourself, like I said, going to active external rotation and you only get around the 45 or basically not as far as the 490 that we got in the passive, run through some of these. And the idea again is to make sure we prime these external rotators so that they can sufficiently stabilize the humerus in the glenoid so the nervous system can then safely move into the end range in a stable position. Okay, so this is a little different to what some people might have done, certainly different to what I was doing years ago, which is basically trying to mobilize and stretch into the position through there, yeah, okay? Okay guys, we're gonna look at internal rotation now. Remembering, of course, we need that internal rotation to be able to get our hands sufficient on the bar and not get too much pronation happening from the elbow, because that's gonna drive some pain as well. So, again, we look at the passive range. So, that's me taking her into internal rotation. Yeah, so we see she's coming down here. We're not getting like a full 90 degrees, but for me that's pretty damn good. So we're getting around sort of, I'd say 70 to 80 degrees there. That's going to be sufficient for what we actually need, okay? So it's always looking at the needs that you have and then using these assessments, sorry, with the end need in mind, okay? So that was the passive range. I was moving her arm. Billy's going to now go into the active range. Can she achieve that range herself? And we see, yeah, she's definitely a little short there, okay? So she's definitely, let's say, I know, probably maybe 20 to 30 degrees short of what we got in the passive range. Great. So again, just to reiterate the point, this doesn't mean that what we've got to do is do a lot of stretching and mobilizations, mobility work to get to that point, because we know that she can get there, yeah? It's not that her arm can't get to that position. It's more that when she's doing it actively on her own, her nervous system can't get to that position with sufficient stability to move into the end range, okay? So we're going to run through some options now for internal rotation priming, just to improve the result through here. So an option we have here, guys, is actually using the squat bar itself. So what we've got to do then is we've got to prime these internal rotators. So with the glenohumeral joint and the rotator cuff, that's predominantly going to be, or that is going to be, sorry, the subscapularis, okay? So with the subscapularis, it's both an internal rotator, but it's also a depressor, and because of the line of pull of the muscles, actually helps to keep the humerus buried back deep in the glenoid through here, yep. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get Billy to try and actively recruit that subscapularis. So she's already in internal rotation, so that's gonna help, yep. Then she's gonna try and suck the humerus into the socket. So actively pull the humerus into the socket and down. And she can probably feel something firing up in here, which is gonna be sort of the fibers of the subscap. She's gonna hold for about 10 seconds and relax. Good, good, good. And she's gonna go again. So again, we're internal rotation anyway. She's rotating here. Isometric contraction for about 10 seconds. It's really firing up that subscap as an internal rotator. And we'll go once more. So internally rotating in, there. Good, good, good. So really think about trying to suck the humerus into the socket there, okay? And relax, that's great. So that's gonna be one option. So you might retest after this and find you can actively move into a greater range of internal rotation. It's gonna set you up for a better position under the bar. We're just gonna run through options 2 and 3 now. So option 2 then, guys, is just very, very simple. It's just going to internal rotation. We're gonna use a band here. Now, I'm not, in terms of actually strengthening the rotator cuff, I'm not a huge fan of using bands, which I'll explain in another video, but for our purposes here, I think it's gonna work fine, okay? So we've got Bella here with her elbow slightly forward of the shoulder, just to keep us in the scapular plane through here. Now she's gonna go into internal rotation, and she's also gonna actively try and get that humerus buried down and back in the socket. There we are, she's gonna go right through. Again, 10 to 12 reps will be great. Good, that's great, Billy. A few more reps. And hold it there, that's great, well done. Excellent, okay. Now, we're just gonna move over to the mat and join us for option 3. Option 3, guys, again, this is just 3 options, it's not exhaustive, is that overhead position with a kettlebell. So Billy's gonna keep the overhead position, but she's actually gonna go into internal rotation through here. You can see that hand moving. So the hand's moving, we also wanna make sure that the whole humerus is moving, yeah? What I see with this sometimes, people will go into internal rotation, but it's all occurring through here. It's not actually occurring through the humerus itself, okay? So around 6 times will be fine. Let's probably go another couple, that's good. And again, we've got that humerus sitting on top of the glenoid, so we're getting some sort of stability in there, just using the structures of the shoulder to help with stability. And in, that'll be great, and come down. We're gonna have a look and see if that's improving. So Billy is gonna get you on the floor again. And we're gonna come out. So if you remember, guys, her active range wasn't as much as her passive range. We're gonna go into internal rotation again and have a look at the active range. Good, that's it. And we're definitely seeing improvement from the previous active range there, yep. Again, it's still a little bit short of that, that passive range that we saw, but when we think about the demands that she has and what we're trying to achieve with this, she's getting about as much internal rotation as she's gonna need to get under the bar efficiently through here, yeah, okay? So again, we're seeing that improvement in active range, which is coming from that brain, that nervous system, determining that now we've got some priming, if you like, of the internal rotators, so they're going to be able to stabilize the glenohumeral joint in greater range of that internal rotation. So we haven't stretched or mobilized or lengthened anything here yet, okay? So try those 3 options if you don't quite get internal rotation, and I'm sure you'll find that your active range improves, and it's going to be a lot easier to get under the bar, okay? So the final component that we're looking at is going to be shoulder extension. So again, we're just going to run through the passive and active range through here. What I'm going to do to get the passive range is move Billy into like a thumb down position. I'm actually going to support her shoulder just to make sure we don't get an increase in range just by going into anterior tilt of the scapula through here. That's not what we're looking for, because we don't want to go, okay, yeah, that's loads of range, that's good, and then get her under the bar here. But by achieving this through getting that anterior tilt of the scapula, we need that posterior tilt of the scapula to stay where it is. So I'm just going to support the shoulder and we're just going to take her into extension of the shoulder through here. So we're looking at around, we'll call that around 30 degrees. So there, then we get her to go into the active range. And can she meet? Yep, she can. She possibly go a little bit further than she did before, but what we see there is that the active and the passive ranges were the same, and they were both sufficient. We're looking around 30-35 degrees, I think, from there. Okay, so she does have sufficient shoulder extension to get under the bar easily, and in both the passive and also the active range. So she's able to keep her shoulders stable in that position, which is ideal. Now, what I commonly see when people come in with upper arm pain through squatting is that the passive range is restricted through here. Yep, and you always see the passive range is restricted. So that's the situation where when we see the passive range and the active range restricted and not moving into the areas we want, that's a situation where we might use some mobility work, some stretching and so on and so forth. So we're just going to give you a couple of options you can use to improve the range through there passively, and very often what I see is the active range increases with that as well. Okay, right guys, so in order to improve the range of extension, yeah, we got to think about what are the muscles that actually take the shoulder into flexion, and it's going to be anterior delt and biceps predominantly. Yep. So what we need to do is we need to try and, I guess, go into some sort of stretch or position where we can tell the brain and the nervous system this is what extension is. Okay, so with this, a very simple stretch, taking a grip of a squat rack or the monolift through here, Billy's going to take her right foot forward and she's going to actively rotate away from her hand this way. Yeah, and what it's going to do is going to help stretch through the bicep, stretch through the front of the shoulder there. Now, what we're also going to make sure is that she's keeping that scapula in a neutral, maybe a posterior position, that she's not getting into this position here with that anterior tilt of the scapula, because again, that's not what we really want. We want to improve range of shoulder extension while the scapula is in a better position for all the things we're going to do, such as squatting. Okay, so this is looking good. She might hold that for around 30 to 60 seconds. And again, although we're calling this a stretch, it's not necessarily lengthening anything, it's actually just taking her into the end position so her nervous system, I guess, remembers where that position is, so it becomes more familiar with the position here. Okay, and then you're just going to, rotate back in here and then come out of the stretch. So the second option for this as well then, guys, is just getting into an incline dumbbell curl position through here. This kind of ties in somewhat to part 4 when we start going through some training considerations, but basically Billy's going to go into that position of retraction, so very similar to a bench press, and we're also going to try and get that scapula depressed as well. With that depression of the scapula, we're keeping it in a position of posterior tilt, so she's not going into anterior tilt, and she's literally just sitting here with her arms hanging straight down with like the gravity line, but you can see now that this is actually behind the midline, so we actually get shoulder extension through here, yeah? Okay, so we're not necessarily reaching back, it's just letting the dumbbell and gravity do its thing and spending a little bit more time in this position of shoulder extension. Yep, again, you could hold this for maybe 30 seconds or so, that'd be good. Of course, this is like the setup for a dumbbell curl, so an option you could have with bicep training is instead of maybe doing barbell curls or something like this, is actually putting yourself in this position, strengthening the bicep in a position that a lot of us in powerlifting and strength sports are actually going to be weak in, which is working behind the midline there. Okay, so it's just another option. So guys, what we've got there is we've shown you how to run through tests for internal rotation, external rotation, and shoulder extension, which are the 3 sort of main requirements along with thoracic extension. But if you're watching this video, you probably know what thoracic extension is and how to get it. So shoulder extension, external rotation, internal rotation of the glenohumeral joint. We've run through some tests you can do for that. We've shown you how to identify the passive and the active range. And if the active range isn't as much as the passive range, which is commonly the case in this situation, you've got 3 options for each of those positions to prime the muscles that you need to offer more stability in the end range of that position, all of which should mean you should be able to get under the bar in a much better position through here, taking more load in the back and less load in the arms. So that's the end of part 3. Join us for part 4, where we run through how do we address maybe deficiencies in tissue tolerance or weakness in that brachialis, because we've got to sustain that essential isometric contraction in the brachialis muscle. Even if we get the bar position right on the back, we still need to utilize some sort of load into the arms, okay? So join us for part 4 and we'll go through some of those and some training considerations for you.